The 1970s were wild, and so were the motorcycles. It was a time when engineers went full mad scientist, racers pushed bikes past their limits, and manufacturers weren't afraid to experiment. Some of these bikes became icons, like the CB750 or the Bonneville. But others? They were just as wild, and somehow forgotten. Today we're digging up legendary motorcycles from the 70s that most riders have never even heard of. And stick around, because one of these bikes was so ahead of its time, it scared even the pros. And another was built in total secrecy by engineers who broke the rules on purpose. Before we continue, if you want to see more of our videos, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and turn on the notification bell. 1975 Honda Goldwing GL1000. When Honda introduced the Goldwing GL1000 in 1975, it didn't just dip a toe into the touring market, it cannonballed into it and changed the course of motorcycle travel forever. This was no sport bike, no scrambler, no racer. This was a luxury liner for the open road, disguised as a motorcycle. At its heart was a flat 4 engine, liquid-cooled, shaft-driven, and tuned for absolute smoothness, displacing 999cc and producing around 80 horsepower. The GL1000 wasn't just about top-end speed, it was about sustained, vibration-free cruising at highway speeds. Riders marveled at how effortlessly it glided along, even under load. The engine was so balanced and refined that it felt more like piloting a grand touring car than a bike. But Honda didn't stop there. The Goldwing had features that were virtually unheard of at the time, like a radiator mounted under the tank, a quiet shaft drive instead of a chain, and a fuel tank cleverly hidden under the seat so the dummy tank could house electronics and storage. Riders were blown away by how thoughtful and future-focused the design was. And while the GL1000 didn't come with fairings or luggage from the factory, it laid the groundwork for what would become the gold standard in motorcycle touring. For anyone looking to cross a continent on 2 wheels in the 70s, this was the way to do it. But even with all its refinement, comfort, and innovation, the Goldwing wasn't built for thrill seekers. That role? Well, that belonged to this next bike. 1973 Yamaha RD350. The Yamaha RD350 was one of the most important two-stroke motorcycles of the 1970s. It was light, fast, affordable, and completely changed what people expected from a middleweight bike. Yamaha designed the RD350 as a direct evolution of its earlier R5 model, but this one came with reed valves for better throttle response and cleaner combustion. Its 347cc air-cooled two-stroke parallel twin engine made about 39 horsepower, but the bike weighed only about 370 pounds wet. That made for incredible power to weight and aggressive acceleration, especially when it hit the power band in the mid-range. It could run the quarter mile in under 14 seconds, quicker than many larger bikes of the era. The RD350's chassis and suspension were also well balanced, giving it solid handling, whether on the street or the track. It had front disc brakes, rare for small bikes at the time, and it became a popular choice for amateur racers and young riders looking for speed on a budget. Yamaha's decision to blend sharp performance with everyday usability helped the RD350 become a global success. It was especially influential in the US and India, where later versions like the RD350LC would gain near-cult status. If the RD350 brought high performance to the masses, the next bike aimed at high-end refinement and long-distance speed. 1973 BMW R90S. The BMW R90S marked a turning point for BMW motorcycles. Before this bike, BMW was known mostly for practical touring machines, but the R90S added a strong dose of sport performance to the brand's reputation. It debuted in 1973 as the company's flagship and helped change the perception of BMW from conservative to competitive. It used a 898cc air-cooled boxer twin engine producing 67 horsepower and 56 pounds-a-foot of torque. With a top speed of around 125 miles per hour, the R90S was one of the fastest production bikes of its time. The engine was paired with a 5-speed transmission and BMW's signature shaft drive system, which required less maintenance than chain-driven bikes. Out of its standard features was its factory-fitted front fairing, something almost unheard of on sport bikes back then. This not only gave it a unique look, but also improved aerodynamics and rider comfort at high speeds. It also came with twin disc brakes at the front, a well-balanced frame, and premium finishes like hand-painted pinstripes. The R90S made a name for itself in racing too, most notably when Reg Pridmore won the inaugural AMA Superbike Championship in 1976, riding one. That success proved BMW could build bikes that were not just reliable, but also fast and competitive. Up next is a machine that dominated the drag strips and redefined straight-line speed in the 70s. 1972 Kawasaki Z1. When Kawasaki released the Z1 in 1972, it sent a clear message. Japan was ready to lead the high-performance motorcycle world. The Z1 wasn't just fast, it was revolutionary. At a time when most large displacement bikes were still relying on pushrod engines and mild performance, the Z1 showed up with a 903cc DOHC inline-4 engine that produced 82 horsepower. That was a big deal in '72. Kawasaki originally intended the Z1 to compete with Honda's CB750, but Honda beat them to the market in 1969. Rather than rush, Kawasaki went back to the drawing board and developed something even more powerful. The result was a machine that could hit 130 miles per hour straight from the factory, with quarter-mile times in the low 12s. It was the fastest production motorcycle in the world when it launched, and unlike most performance bikes at the time, it was also reliable and easy to live with. The Z1 featured a 5-speed transmission, dual overhead cams, and a strong tubular steel frame. Its suspension and brakes weren't groundbreaking, but they were solid and well matched to the bike's power. Kawasaki didn't just sell the Z1 as a muscle bike, it positioned it as a high-performance all-rounder that could tour, commute, or dominate at the drag strip. Styling-wise, the Z1 had a clean, muscular look with its signature teardrop tank, 4x4 exhaust, and a no-nonsense attitude. And it sold like crazy. Riders loved its mix of power, smoothness, and mechanical simplicity. It became a cornerstone of Kawasaki's reputation and laid the groundwork for the Z7 series that continues to this day. But while the Z1 was taking over the straights, this next bike gave birth to a whole new segment. If you're still watching, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell, because we've got more amazing videos lined up for you. 1971 Harley-Davidson FX Superglide. The Harley-Davidson FX Superglide wasn't the fastest or the most advanced bike of the 70s, but it was one of the most important. This was the first true factory custom motorcycle, a bridge between Harley's big touring bikes and stripped-down choppers. Before the Superglide, custom bikes were something you had to build yourself. After it, you could walk into a dealership and ride one off the showroom floor. At its core, the Superglide was a mashup of Harley's existing parts. It took the powerful 74 cubic inch shovelhead V-twin engine from the FL touring line and dropped it into a lighter, narrower FX frame more commonly used on Sportsters. The result was a bike with serious torque and a more aggressive stripped-back silhouette. It pushed out around 60 horsepower, not record-breaking, but plenty for cruising or street performance, especially with that unmistakable Harley rumble. But what really set the Superglide apart was its style. Designed by Willie G. Davidson, grandson of one of Harley's founders, the bike was his answer to the growing custom scene in California. The most controversial feature? That boat-tail rear fender inspired by café racers and muscle cars. Some riders loved it, others hated it, but everyone had an opinion. The bold red, white, and blue sparkling America paint job didn't hurt either. Over time, Harley dialed back the boat tail and leaned into the Superglide's performance and custom potential. It became the foundation for future Harley models like the Lowrider and Wide Glide, and helped shape the identity of the brand moving into the 1980s and beyond. Next up is a bike that didn't just look fast, it was a full-blown superbike dressed in street clothes, and it terrorized the roads and tracks in equal measure. 1972 Suzuki GT750. When Suzuki introduced the GT750 in 1971, it wasn't just pushing boundaries, it was doing something no other Japanese manufacturer had done before. This was the first mass-produced Japanese motorcycle with a liquid-cooled engine, earning it the nickname Water Buffalo in the US and Kettle in the UK. And while its weight and bulk turned off sport riders, those who appreciated comfort, smoothness, and long-distance capability found something truly special. The GT750 used a 738cc two-stroke inline three-cylinder engine that made about 67 horsepower and 56 pounds-foot of torque. But what made it unique wasn't just the power, it was the way it delivered it. Unlike the peaky, high-revving two-strokes of the era, the GT750 delivered torque early and stayed smooth across the rev range. That made it surprisingly easy to ride in real-world conditions, especially for a two-stroke. The liquid cooling system kept temperatures stable, allowing tighter tolerances and more consistent performance, something that air-cooled bikes of the time often struggled with, especially in traffic or on hot days. The bike also featured Suzuki's Ram Air system, a shroud over the cylinder head to direct airflow, a 5-speed gearbox, and triple disc brakes starting in later models, making it one of the first production bikes to get dual front discs and a rear disc brake. Despite weighing over 500 pounds wet, the GT750 was stable, comfortable, and great for long rides. And while it may not be the quickest off the line, its top-end speed of about 110 to 115 miles per hour was more than enough for its time. The exhaust note from the 3 chrome pipes was also a standout, unmistakable and more refined than other two-strokes. But perhaps the most important legacy of the GT750 is that it showed Suzuki was ready to compete with the big boys, not just on performance, but on innovation and engineering too. It bridged the gap between wild two-stroke power and touring comfort, creating something that stood out from every other bike on the market. If the GT750 was Suzuki's bold move into innovation and refinement, the next bike was Kawasaki's return to brute force, raw, unapologetic, and completely untamed. 1972 Kawasaki H2 Mach 4. Few motorcycles from the 1970s have a reputation as wild as the Kawasaki H2 Mach 4. This bike wasn't built for balance, it wasn't built for comfort. It was built to go fast, very fast, and scare the hell out of anyone who didn't respect it. Introduced in 1972 as the successor to already rowdy H1 Mach 3, the H2 pushed the formula even further with a bigger engine and more power. At its heart was a 748cc air-cooled two-stroke inline triple that produced 74 horsepower at 6,800 RPM and a massive 57 pounds-foot of torque. For a bike that weighed only around 450 pounds, that kind of output was explosive. It could run the quarter mile in under 12 seconds, putting it on par with the fastest cars of the era, and hit a top speed of around 120 to 125 miles per hour. But it wasn't just about numbers. The way the power came on, sudden, aggressive, and unpredictable, meant you had to stay sharp every second. The H2 had a reputation for wheelies in first and second gear without even trying. Early models had weak frames and marginal suspension, which meant straight-line speed was thrilling, but cornering could be downright terrifying. Later versions improved frame stiffness and handling slightly, but the H2 never lost its wild personality. If you weren't ready for it, the bike let you know fast. In a way, the H2 was Kawasaki's answer to the CB750 and other Big Fours. Instead of following the four-stroke route, Kawasaki went all in on two-stroke insanity. The H2 was lighter, faster in a straight line, and way more aggressive. It was never meant to be practical. It was meant to dominate the drag strip and thrill the rider, and it did exactly that. Despite being difficult to control, the H2 developed a loyal fan base and became a cult classic. Today, collectors hunt down clean examples, and riders who lived through the 70s often remember it as one of the most exciting and dangerous motorcycles they ever threw a leg over. Next is a bike that didn't rely on brute force. It reshaped Italian design, racing tech, and road performance into one of the decade's most refined machines. 1974 Ducati 750 SS. The Ducati 750 Supersport wasn't just a great motorcycle, it was a turning point for Ducati as a brand. Built in direct response to Ducati's 1-2 finish at the 1972 Imola 200, the 750 SS carried the same DNA as the race-winning machines that beat the dominant Japanese bikes on their home turf. It wasn't mass-produced, and it wasn't cheap, but it became a legend because of what it stood for: Italian racing heritage, uncompromised design, and mechanical purity. Under the fairing was a 748cc 90-degree V-twin engine, known for its desmodramatic valve system, a unique Ducati hallmark where valves are opened and closed mechanically instead of using springs. This gave the engine incredible precision and reliability at high RPMs, something racers deeply appreciated. The motor delivered around 73 horsepower, but more importantly, it had perfect balance and immediate throttle response. It revved quickly and smoothly with the distinctive sound that could only come from a Desmo L twin. The frame was a tubular steel masterpiece designed by Fabio Tagnali, and the bike's geometry favored stability and agility at high speed. With a dry weight of around 400 pounds, it felt nimble, and combined with clip-on handlebars, rear-set foot pegs, and long fuel tank, it had true race bike ergonomics, demanding but rewarding. The 750 SS was also one of the first bikes to popularize the café racer aesthetic in a serious factory-built way. With its silver-blue paint scheme, hand-polished engine covers, and wire-spoked wheels, it looked like a work of art. Everything about the bike, from the swept-back fairing to the racing-style fiberglass tail, reminded you that this was born on the track. Only a few hundred units were ever made. But what makes surviving examples incredibly valuable today? Collectors see it at the start of modern Ducati, the bike that laid the foundation for the 900 SS, the 851, and even today's Panigales. But if Ducati brought precision and artistry to the road, this next bike on this list delivered something even more significant: an entire cultural movement on two wheels. 1970 Harley-Davidson XR750. There's a reason the Harley-Davidson XR750 sits at the top of this list, and it's not just about speed or engineering. This was the bike that defined American flat-track racing in the 1970s and became one of the most successful race bikes in Harley's history. It dominated the AMA Grand National Championship and helped create an American racing legacy that still echoes through the sport today. Born from a need to replace the outdated KR750, the XR750 was originally built using iron-head cylinders and a 748cc pushrod V-twin that produced around 75 horsepower. But the real breakthrough came in 1972, when Harley redesigned the engine with aluminum heads and barrels. This made it lighter, more durable, and far more competitive. From that point on, it became nearly unstoppable. On the dirt oval, the XR750 was a beast. Lightweight, responsive, and incredibly powerful for its size. Riders like Jay Springsteen, Mark Bressflord, and Cal Rayborn used it to rack up national titles. And then there was Evel Knievel. If you've ever seen footage of his most iconic jumps, Caesar's Palace, Wembley, Snake River, it was the XR750 underneath him. That bike didn't just win races, it jumped over buses, fountains, and canyons. Part of what made the XR750 so special was its simplicity. It had no fairings, minimal instrumentation, and a stripped-down chassis built for speed and control. It wasn't designed for comfort or touring, it was designed to win. Yet that raw, no-nonsense design appealed to riders everywhere. It captured the spirit of American racing, rebellion, and bravado like no other machine. Despite being a pure race bike, the XR750's influence bled into Harley's street lineup. Bikes like the XR1200 and even some Sportster models carried its flat track-inspired DNA. And today, still is one of the most respected motorcycles ever built. So which of these forgotten legends deserves a comeback? Drop your pick in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video if you love two-wheeled history. Subscribe for more bikes that time left behind. The moto revolution is just getting started.